Rhino horn commands an astronomical price on the black market, fetching up to $65,000 per kilogram. But the true cost of this illegal trade is far more devastating. It's not only about money, though, it's also about the brutal decimation of endangered species and the destruction of entire ecosystems. So sit back for a moment, because we're going to take you deep into the shadowy world of wildlife trafficking. You're going to witness firsthand the heartbreaking consequences of the illegal trade, and you'll also see how this criminal enterprise operates, the global networks that it fuels, and the staggering impact that it has on the planet's most vulnerable creatures. The lure of rhino horn. The sun hangs low over Kruger National Park, casting long shadows across the savanna. A white rhino lumbers through the grass, its massive form a picture of prehistoric power. And for millions of years, its kind has roamed these lands, unbothered by the petty concerns of humans. But today, this peace is about to be shattered. A crack echoes across the plain. The rhino's ears twitch, but it's too late. A shot rings out, and the magnificent creature crumples to the ground. Within moments, poachers descend upon the fallen giant, their movements practiced and efficient, and they work quickly, hacking away at the rhino's face with machetes. Their prize? Its horn. Nothing more than compressed keratin, the same substance that's found in human fingernails. This seemingly worthless body part drives a multi-billion-dollar illegal trade. In certain parts of Asia, rhino horn is believed to have various medicinal properties, and it's also seen as a status symbol for the wealthy. The demand is so high, in fact, that it fetches astronomical prices on the black market. And the cruel irony is that there's zero scientific evidence supporting any medicinal properties of rhino horn. It's all based on myths and misconceptions that have persisted for centuries. People are paying fortunes for something that's essentially the same as chewing their own fingernails. Yet the belief in its power is so strong that it's driving rhinos to the brink of extinction. In South Africa alone, home to about 80% of the world's rhinos, poaching has increased dramatically since 2007. Behind every poached rhino lies a complex network of criminals, from desperate local poachers to international smuggling rings and corrupt officials. It's an underground world where every single horn can change hands multiple times, increasing in value at each and every step before reaching its final destination. The numbers are staggering. Wildlife trafficking is estimated to be worth up to $23 billion annually, making it one of the world's largest illegal trades, alongside drugs, weapons, and human trafficking. But who are the people who are willing to risk it all for this illegal trade? From the poverty-stricken poachers to the wealthy buyers, each player in this deadly game has their own motivations. The poacher's desperate gamble. Abu lives in a ramshackle tin shack on the outskirts of Kruger National Park. At age 45, he's weathered and worn, his calloused hands telling the story of a life of hard labor. Despite all best efforts, Abu can barely feed his family. The nearby villages offer very few job opportunities, and the park that teems with wildlife might as well be on another planet for all the benefit it brings to locals like him. One night, a stranger approaches him with an offer. These strangers have been watching the area for days, sure that Abu is the perfect man for their criminal activity because he lives near the park. For one single night's work, he could earn more than a year's wages. All he has to do is guide a team into the park and help them to take down a rhino. The risk is enormous because if caught, Abu faces years in prison. But with hungry mouths to feed at home, the temptation becomes overwhelming. Abu's story is not unique, though. Poaching gangs exploit the vulnerability of locals like him, recruiting them for their knowledge of the terrain and the wildlife behavior. For many, it's not about greed or a lack of morals. It's about survival in a world where the options are scarce. As Abu contemplates the offer, his mind races, knowing that what he's considering is wrong, but also knowing that accepting it could mean that his children will not go to bed hungry. It becomes a real devil's bargain, and one that thousands of desperate people make each and every year. What many don't realize, though, is how little the poachers themselves actually make from the deadly trade. Abu may be risking his life and freedom for a payout of $500 to $1,000, which is a fortune to him, but a tiny fraction of the horn's final value. The real money is made further up the chain by the smugglers and dealers who face far less personal risk. With the horn secured, its journey is only beginning. From the blood-soaked grounds of Kruger National Park, it will pass through many hands, increasing in value with each and every transaction. But first it has to get out of the country, and that's where an entirely new set of players enter the game. The smugglers. As night falls on the border between South Africa and Mozambique, a truck approaches the checkpoint. The driver appears calm, but hidden within his cargo lies a grim secret, a freshly harvested rhino horn worth more than his vehicle and the entire contents combined. This scene plays out repeatedly along Africa's porous borders. Smugglers have developed increasingly sophisticated methods to move their illegal cargo. Some hide rhino horns in hollow car batteries, while others use sex workers as decoys in order to obtain legal hunting permits. These permits will allow them to move horns across borders under the guise of trophy hunting. The scale of the illegal trade is absolutely staggering. In 2016 alone, poachers took over 1,175 rhinos in South Africa, which is more than 3 rhinos each and every day. Each of those horns had to cross at least one international border in order to reach its final destination. Law enforcement agencies are fighting back though, but it is an uphill battle. They've increased border patrols, implemented more rigorous inspection procedures, and even used sniffer dogs trained to detect rhino horn. But for each and every shipment intercepted, many more slip through the cracks undetected. Traffickers are quick to exploit any legal loophole they can find, some using legitimate businesses as fronts for their illegal activities, while others manipulate hunting permit systems, bribing officials to issue fraudulent documentation. It's a constant game of cat and mouse, with smugglers always seeking new ways to be one step ahead of the law. As the truck passes through each and every checkpoint, the driver breathes a sigh of relief. The rhino horn is carefully concealed and has made it across the border undetected. Its value has just increased exponentially, and now one step closer to its final destination in Asia. From here, the horn will change hands multiple times, increasing in value even further. As it moves from place to place, the methods of concealment and transport will evolve, always adapting in order to stay ahead of law enforcement efforts. Inside of a nondescript office, a well-dressed businessman leans back in his leather chair, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, we've just acquired a stunning piece of antique art," he says, "a genuine 19th century rhino horn carving. Impeccable provenance, of course." This is the world of wildlife trafficking's middlemen, the white-collar criminals who transform poached animal parts into seemingly legitimate goods. They operate behind the facade of legitimate businesses like art galleries, antique shops, and agricultural companies. But beneath the surface, these enterprises serve a much darker purpose: laundering illegal wildlife products into the legal market. One of the most brazen examples of this criminal ingenuity comes from Chumlong Lemtong Tai, a key figure in rhino horn trafficking. Lemtong Tai developed a scheme to obtain legal export permits for poached horns, hiring sex workers to pose as big game hunters and photographing them with dead rhinos to create the illusion of a legal trophy hunt. This elaborate charade allowed him to export millions of dollars worth of rhino horn across borders under the guise of personal hunting trophies. But creating false provenance is just one trick of the middleman's playbook. Many use complex networks of front companies in order to obscure the origins of their products. A horn might pass through several seemingly unrelated businesses, perhaps even a farm, and then a shipping company, then an art dealer, and with each transaction, it becomes harder to trace the horn back to its illegal source. The financial techniques used to hide the proceeds of wildlife crime are equally sophisticated. False documentation, shell companies, and intricate money laundering schemes all play a role. These methods allow criminals to integrate millions of dollars from wildlife trafficking into the legitimate economy. A rhino horn may be falsely documented as an antique, allowing it to be sold openly in high-end auction houses. And the scale of these laundering operations becomes staggering. Wildlife trafficking is now a multi-billion-dollar industry, increasingly intertwined with other forms of transnational crime. Organized crime groups, attracted by the high profits and relatively low risk, are becoming more involved in this lucrative market. As our businessman ends his call, satisfied with another successful transaction, the rhino horn, which is now disguised as a valuable antique, begins its next leg of the journey. From this sterile office, it will soon find its way to a shipping container bound for distant shores. The middlemen have transformed a brutal action of poaching into a seemingly legitimate business deal, but the story of this horn and the criminal network behind it is far from over. Hiding in plain sight. The shipping container creaks as it's hoisted onto the massive cargo ship, its contents a mystery to all but a select few. This innocuous steel box joins thousands of others, each one a potential hiding place for illicit goods. As the ship sets sail for Asia, it carries a dark secret on board, a fortune in rhino horns disguised and hidden amongst legitimate cargo. The challenge for law enforcement becomes immense. With millions of containers moving through ports worldwide, finding illegal wildlife products is incredibly difficult. Less than 2% of these containers ever get physically inspected, giving smugglers a huge advantage. Traffickers are constantly innovating to hide their contraband. They might hollow out logs and stuff them with horns before filling a container with what looks like a legitimate timber shipment. Or they may create false compartments in shipping containers, hiding the horns behind walls that appear solid to the naked eye. Some concealment methods are surprisingly low-tech. There have been cases where rhino horns were ground into powder and mixed with other substances to look like common goods, like coffee or plaster. Once the shipment arrives at its destination, the horns can be extracted and then reconstituted. Traffickers may also exploit legitimate shipping companies, often without their own knowledge. They'll use false documentation, mislabel their cargo, and avoid suspicion. And a container full of rhino horns might be listed as handicrafts or machine parts on the manifest. However, law enforcement is developing brand new techniques to catch these smugglers. X-ray scanners can peer inside of containers without opening them, and sniffer dogs are being trained to detect the scent of the rhino horn. There's even research being conducted on using African giant pouched rats in order to sniff out wildlife contraband at ports. Yet for every advancement in detection, smugglers are seeming to find a brand new way around it. It becomes an endless game of cat and mouse, played out on the global scale, and with each successful shipment, more rhinos fall victim to the brutal trade. As our container ship disappears over the horizon, its illicit cargo safely hidden away, we're left to wonder, what drives this insatiable demand? Why are people willing to pay such astronomical amounts for rhino horn? But to answer that, we have to follow this shipment to its final destination, where culture, status, and misguided beliefs fuel a market that's pushing an entire species to the brink of extinction. The buyers, status, and greed. In a luxurious Shanghai apartment, well-dressed businessmen gather around a small table. Their eyes are fixed upon a rhino horn, polished and mounted on an ornate base. The host, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, lifts it with reverence. "Gentlemen," he says, his voice filling with pride, "this represents power, wealth, and connections." This scene plays out in high-end homes all across Asia, where rhino horn has become a coveted luxury item. But what exactly is it that leads people to pay such an absurd amount for something that consists of only keratin, just like the human fingernail? The answer lies in a complex web of cultural beliefs and status-seeking behavior. In some circles, serving rhino horn to guests or giving it as a gift is a way to flaunt your wealth. It's become a symbol of success and prosperity. Even more troubling is how this demand has created a thriving black market. Most of the horns end up in Vietnam and China, where they fetch tremendous prices. So then, that leaves the question, how is rhino horn actually used? In many cases, it's ground into a fine powder. This powder may be mixed into a drink, sprinkled on food, or even snorted like cocaine. Some people even keep whole horns as decorative objects, believing that they bring good luck. As the group passes the horn around, admiring its smooth surface, they're actually participating in a trade that is causing untold amounts of suffering. Every horn on the market represents a dead rhino, often killed in a brutal fashion. But who is it that's really profiting from this deadly trade? While these buyers are paying top dollar, they are just the end of a long chain. Behind the scenes, a fishy network of criminals is orchestrating the global enterprise, raking in billions at the expense of a species. This insatiable appetite for rhino horn is pushing these magnificent creatures to the brink of extinction. But what these businessmen see as a symbol of their success is, in reality, a testament to human greed and ignorance. The Kingpins. Imagine for a moment a luxury villa nestled within the hills of Southeast Asia. Inside of it, a man known as Vijay Keosavang coordinates a vast network of poachers, smugglers, and corrupt officials. Dubbed as the Pablo Escobar of wildlife trafficking, his network spans multiple countries, dealing in rhino horns, ivory, pangolin scales, and other endangered animal parts. These wildlife kingpins don't only run poaching operations, they're also involved in countless illegal activities that include drug trafficking and human smuggling. The profits are staggering. Take Chumlong Limtong Tai as an example, another key figure in the rhino horn market. He had managed to make almost $9 million from just 40 rhinos alone. That's more than $220,000 per horn, while the poachers themselves only see a tiny fraction of that amount. The tentacles of these criminal networks reach far and wide, exploiting corruption at every level, from local police to high-ranking government officials. And the web of bribery and influence peddling allows them to operate with near impunity in many countries. Interpol has highlighted that wildlife crime is increasingly linked with armed violence and other forms of organized crime, making it a complex issue that threatens global security. These wildlife trafficking networks are often involved in smuggling drugs, weapons, and even people. And despite some high-profile arrests, like Limtong Tai, the overall picture remains grim. Law enforcement agencies are struggling to keep up with these sophisticated criminal networks, and the challenges are immense. Lack of resources, insufficient prioritization of wildlife crime, and the sheer scale of these operations make it nearly impossible to end everything. As we peel back the layers of the criminal underworld, one thing becomes clear. The illegal wildlife trade is intertwined with some of the world's most dangerous criminal enterprises. In the face of such organized crime, how could we even possibly fight back? The answer lies in the global effort that's as complicated and far-reaching as the criminal network itself. Task forces and tough choices. In the shadows of this multi-billion-dollar illegal trade, a silent war is raging. Task forces from around the world are coming together, facing an enemy that constantly adapts and evolves. The challenge becomes daunting, and the stakes could not be higher. Imagine a room where international investigators gather around, surrounded by evidence, maps, photographs, forensic reports, covering each and every surface, and these dedicated professionals are the front line in the battle against wildlife trafficking. One of the biggest hurdles these task forces face is the cross-border nature of wildlife crime. A rhino might be killed in one country, its horns smuggled through another, and then sold in a third. Each step involving different jurisdictions, laws, and enforcement agencies, making it incredibly difficult to track and prosecute the criminals. But law enforcement is fighting back. Using innovative tactics, Interpol has been coordinating massive global operations, mobilizing authorities from numerous countries, and the efforts have led to thousands of seizures and arrests worldwide. This sends a clear message that the international community is united against wildlife crime. Task forces are employing cutting-edge technology and unconventional methods. DNA analysis has become a powerful tool in wildlife forensics as scientists have established genetic databases for endangered species. This allows authorities to trace seized items back to specific animals or populations. These efforts are yielding results. Recent operations have led to significant seizures of ivory, rhino horn, and other illegal wildlife products, disrupting criminal networks and saving countless animals. However, the battle is far from over. Despite advancements, the illegal wildlife trade continues to thrive. The demand for these products remains high, and the potential profits are enormous. Near Kruger National Park, local rangers work side by side with villagers. This scene represents a shift from traditional conservation methods that often operated like fortresses, keeping communities out and the wildlife in, which created resentment and conflict. But now, a new model emerges, one that empowers local populations to protect the wildlife. The strategy is based on a simple idea: when communities benefit from conservation, they're more likely to support it, and several African countries are seeing promising results from the programs. Living alongside wildlife does come with its challenges. Elephants will trample crops, lions stalk the livestock, and this human-wildlife conflict becomes a daily reality for many communities near protected areas, often driving people to poach out of desperation or even revenge. To address the issues, conservationists collaborate with communities on innovative solutions, some using physical barriers to keep animals away from crops, while others focus on education about coexisting safely with the wildlife. There are even compensation schemes for farmers who suffer losses due to animals. But when done correctly, this approach also creates a positive cycle. Wildlife tourism generates revenue which is reinvested into local infrastructure, education, and healthcare. It improves quality of life while reducing the economic pressures that often lead to poaching. As attitudes shift, people who once saw animals as threats or commodities are becoming their fiercest protectors. It's a powerful reminder that conservation is about creating a sustainable future for both wildlife and humans alike. But community engagement is just one piece of the very large puzzle. And that leaves the question, what else can be done to stop these poachers? Tech solutions. In the ongoing battle to protect the rhino, rangers are employing innovative technologies to gain an edge. While drones and AI-powered predictive analysis have become game changers, new advancements are pushing the boundaries even further. One of the most exciting developments is the use of heartbeat sensors for rhinos. These devices can alert rangers if an animal is in distress, essentially providing a personal bodyguard for each and every one of them. A level of protection that was unimaginable only a few years ago. Camera traps have also evolved significantly, the latest models using artificial intelligence to distinguish between animals, poachers, and the park rangers themselves. As soon as any suspicious activity is detected, they instantly alert the security teams, and this dramatically reduces time spent manually reviewing thousands of photos. But for each and every advancement in protection, poachers are upping their game, using night vision goggles, silenced weapons, and even hacking into radio communications. It's a constant arms race, with the fate of an entire species hanging in the balance. But the challenges don't end there. Many parks are struggling with limited infrastructure and the high cost of implementing these systems, as training local personnel to effectively use the tools turns into another hurdle that has to be overcome. And perhaps what is most surprising is how wildlife trackers are exploiting social media platforms, using encrypted messaging apps and code words to connect with buyers while coordinating shipments. This dark twist on technology is forcing law enforcement to adapt quickly and find new ways to both track and intercept these illegal operations. As we look to the future, the question remains: can these technological advancements turn the tide in rhino conservation before it becomes too late? The race against time continues on, with dedicated conservationists working tirelessly to stay one step ahead of those who would harm these magnificent creatures. Hope for rhinos. Criminal gangs claim to have killed 1/3 of the remaining Javan rhinos. The special, or rather bad thing about this, is that these rhinos only live in the Java National Park in Indonesia and have not been in captivity for over 100 years. The WWF estimates a population of only 76 specimens, but amidst these dire predictions, there are signs of progress that give conservationists reason for cautious optimism. In March of 2024, camera traps captured a heartening sight: a mother Javan rhino and her calf roaming freely in their natural habitat. The image proves that despite the relentless threat of poaching, rhinos can still reproduce and thrive under the right safeguards. Ambitious plans for the rhino conservation efforts are taking shape across Africa and Asia. Experts are pushing for the establishment of a second site for Javan rhinos, a move that could mitigate risk from both natural disasters and poaching. It's a proactive approach that recognizes the need to diversify protection strategies for these endangered creatures. Long-term strategies are evolving to address the complex nature of rhino conservation. New initiatives focusing on integrating advanced technology with traditional anti-poaching methods, while satellite tracking, thermal imaging cameras, and AI-powered predictive analysis are all being deployed to enhance security in national parks. These tools provide rangers with real-time data, allowing them to respond more effectively to potential threats. Cross-border cooperation amongst law enforcement agencies is intensifying as countries are sharing intelligence, coordinating operations, and standardizing penalties for wildlife crimes. This unified approach aims to dismantle the sophisticated networks of wildlife criminals that operate all across international boundaries. Conservation efforts are also exploring innovative funding models. Some organizations are experimenting with rhino bonds, where investors receive returns based on the successful growth of the rhino populations. This approach aligns financial incentives with conservation goals while potentially attracting new sources of funding for protection efforts. And as we stand at these crossroads for rhino conservation, one thing becomes clear: every single one of us has a role to play. You don't have to be a ranger or even a scientist to make a difference. By participating in awareness campaigns, advocating against the use of rhino horn, and supporting organizations that work towards wildlife protection, each one of us can contribute to this vital cause. The road ahead for rhinos is full of challenges, but it's not without hope. With every calf that's born, with every poacher caught, and every mind that's changed about the value of the rhino horn, we inch closer and closer to a future where these magnificent creatures will be able to roam free without the threat of extinction.